Hello. For decades, European politics was dominated by mainstream, center left, and center right parties that broadly agreed on the direction of the European Union, immigration, and economic policy. Today, that consensus is breaking down. Across Europe, voters are increasingly turning toward nationalist and populist movements that promise stronger borders, greater national sovereignty, and a challenge to political elites. France has become the most important battleground in this broader shift because it is not just another European country, it is one of the founding members of the European Union, a nuclear power, a permanent member of the UN Security Council, and the second largest economy in the Eurozone. If France elects a far right government in 2027, the consequences would extend far beyond Paris. Such a result could reshape the future of European integration after the balance of the power inside the EU and influence how Europe responds to challenges from Russia, China, and the US. The upcoming French election is therefore not just a national contest. It may become one of the most consequential political event in the Europe in a generation. The rise of a nationalist party is not happening in a vacuum. It is being driven by a combination of cultural, social, and economic concerns that many voters feel have been ignored for years. Immigration has become one of the most debated issues across Europe. Many citizens worry about integration, social cohesion, and pressure on public services. Crime and security concerns also receive significant attention, particularly when high profile incidents dominate the news coverage and social media. At the same time, economic frustrations are also growing. Many working and middle class households feel that while the economies have expanded, their own living standards have stagnated. Housing costs, energy prices, and everyday expenses have risen faster than the income in many places. These concerns have created a sense among many voters that traditional parties no longer represents them. Nationalist movements have successfully presented themselves as the only alternative to an establishment that voters increasingly distrust. The result is a political realignment in which supporters shifting away from traditional parties towards movements promising the dramatic change. Economic anxiety is often the foundation on which political change is built. France has experienced years of relatively slow economic growth while the government debt has climbed steadily. Major spending programs during the pandemic and the energy crisis helped protect the households and businesses, but they also significantly increased the public debt. Today, France's debt is among the highest in Europe. At the same time, many workers feel that their wages have not kept pace with the rising cost of living. This combination creates a political and a powerful dynamic. Even if governments successfully avoid the economic crisis, voters may still feel that their personal situation is not improving. When people become frustrated with the status quo, they become more willing to support candidates promising the major reforms. Nationalist parties have been able to capitalize on this mood by arguing that established politicians have had decades to solve these problems and have failed to deliver the meaningful results. Economic dissatisfaction therefore becomes not just a financial issue but a political force capable of reshaping the entire countries. France occupies a unique position within Europe. It is one of the architects of the European Union and has historically been one of the strongest advocates for deeper European integration. Alongside Germany, France has often driven major EU initiatives on defense, trade, industrial policy, and foreign affairs. Because of its size and influence, decisions made in Paris often shape the policies across the continent. France is also the EU's only nuclear power and the bloc's only permanent member on the United Security Council. This means that a political shift in France could carry far greater consequences than a similar changes in smaller European countries. A government that challenges the existing EU rules could slow decision making on immigration, defense cooperation, sanctions against Russia, support for Ukraine, and the future EU expansion. In many ways, the future direction of Europe may depend heavily on the political choices France makes over the next few years. France is not an isolated case. It is part of a much broader political trend that has emerged across the Western world. In 2016, the United Kingdom voted for Brexit, choosing to leave the European Union. In the same year, Donald Trump won the US presidential election by campaigning against many established political norms. Since then, the Nationalist and the Populist Party have gained influence in countries such as Hungary, Germany, Italy, Netherlands, Sweden, and others. Although each country has its own unique circumstances, many of those movements draw support from similar concerns. Voters often express frustration with immigration, economic inequality, globalization, and what they see as the distant political elites making the decisions without a public consent. The common thread is a growing demand for national control and political change. What is happening in France therefore reflects a larger transformation that has been reshaping the Western democracies for more than a decade. If France elects a nationalist government, the effects could be felt across Europe and beyond. Within the European Union, disagreements could emerge over budgets, immigration policies, common defense initiatives, and the future direction of European integration. Decision making in Brussels could become slower and more difficult. On foreign policy, debates could intensify regarding the sanctions on Russia, military assistance to Ukraine, and Europe's broader security strategy. France's position matters enormously because of its military strength and diplomatic influence. Financial markets would also closely monitor any new government's economic plans. Investors typically seek stability and predictability. If concerns arise about the France's fiscal position, borrowing costs could increase, creating an additional pressure on public finances. At the same time, relations with United States and the NATO could become more complicated if France adopts a more independent foreign policy approach. The choices made by the French voters in 2027 could therefore influence not only France's future but also the future of the European Union, the NATO, and the wider international order. Thank you.